Hello guys and gals, and welcome. So today I wanted to do a review of Titan Quest 2, and to do that I needed to come across, like all of the various scenarios and play tons of different characters and really give you like a full sort of understanding of what's going on in this game. I've done two characters full to the end, and I've also started a third, and I have a fourth one specifically set up just so that I can access all the masteries. As it currently is, there are 4 masteries in the game, and because there are 4 masteries, there are technically a myriad of characters, essentially, or classes that you can play. So you have essentially 4 masteries, and you can combine them in a bunch of different ways to make a bunch of different sort of, quote-unquote classes. There is the Storm Mastery, which is revolving around ice and lightning. There is the Earth Mastery, which is revolving around physical and fire. There's the Rogue Mastery, which is revolving around kind of like poison, physical, sort of. And then there's also the Warrior, or like the Warlord, or Warrior, what the hell is his name? I can't even remember. Kind of like a Barbarian Mastery. Includes things like leaping and stomping and whatnot, and tends to be more around like a physical melee fighter. In general, this game is set up like an ARPG, and if I bring in like GG Mentor, this is my first character, I can kind of show you some of the basics of how the game functions. It's very rare for me to say this, but I have never really had a game before where I didn't really have anything to complain about. Like, I've played a lot of games in my time, and there's usually something wrong with most of them. Some small detail that just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Some little thing that just kind of like stands out of place, or some, like setting in the controls that I really can't change that irks the ever-living daylights out of me. And one thing I'll say about Titan Quest so far is that I have had absolutely no issues with this game, really whatsoever. The small, tiny issues that I've had were easily fixable within the settings, like binding my right click to one of the options, and I did have some small issues with like the dialogue was a little bit lower than the music, which the music is amazing, by the way, but the music was sometimes drowning out the dialogue, so I had to lower down the volume of the music to, adjust that. But overall, just really, really cool. The animations, the music, the storyline, the dialogue options, the bosses, I really didn't have any complaints about any of it. The bosses were really fun and somewhat quite challenging depending on which boss you fought. There are quite a few bosses in the game. Right now, there is only Act 1 though. So I will say this, is that you only have access to Act 1 right now, and there's really not like a super huge amount of content, but there are currently 4 bosses in the game total. There's one boss. Well, I'm trying to point out the bosses. There's one boss right here. This is the kind of like, what did they call it? The Krampus or something. It was like, I don't really know exactly what the name, because it's a really crazy name. There's also Pan that you will fight. Pan is fought up here. There's an end boss, which is fought inside the Morai Temple, and there's also an entirely another boss that's fought over in the cemetery, in the crypt area. There's basically a tons of like little mini bosses all over the place too, which I would probably put more in the elite category. But there are like full-blown bosses that have like entire mechanics and things that you need to dodge and whatnot. Now you can power through a lot of them with DPS checks. And very interestingly enough, in single player, you can access a menu to respawn most of them. So if you go up to this little ritual altar up here, even though there isn't a super large amount of content in the game, you can actually increase the amount of content that's in the game by using the remnants, which allow you to respawn the bosses. And then you can also utilize the Rituals of the Ages, which allows you to increase the difficulty above your level. You can also adjust the minimum difficulty of all the monsters in the game to your minimum level, which allows you to basically refresh the world, getting a little bit more difficult content. And then even further than that, you can bring the monsters above your level by a certain amount, to add even more challenge into the mix so that you can, number one, level up, and number two, you can, have monsters that are actually much harder once you've defeated the game. You can also pay money to have monsters respawned, and you can even go to specific areas once you've turned in the remnants. There should be one there now. So you see here, this is one of the remnants of one of the bosses, the Hippocampos. That's the name of the boss. And there's another one up here, which is Pan. And then we should also have the Disepilagologos is also over here. There's a couple different bosses that you can respawn. Actually really enjoyed fighting the bosses, and they kicked my butt several times, and I had to get good to actually push out the damage that I needed to make things work. The skill system is probably one of the most interesting, is that it allows you to customize everything from like your dodges, your barrier, even your basic attack in multiple ways, adding things like conversion to frost, conversion to lightning, conversion to fire, and so forth and so on. There's essentially like 100 ways that you could customize even your basic ability, which is kind of nuts. Like, as an example, you could potentially add on like 3 volley points, and you could add in a large amount of additional shots. So, like, if I were to just shove everything in here and grab, like, maximum volley, when I shoot my regular attack, I'm going to get, like, multiple arrows. You can see I can now turn my basic attack into essentially what's a multi-shot. Inside the tree, also, you have your 2 masteries. So you get to choose 2 of any masteries, and you get to mix and match points between them. The way they control this is that there's 3 different tiers, and the 3 different tiers are essentially set up with divinity. As you level, you get more divinity, and you can assign that divinity to a specific tree, essentially designating that tree as your primary or secondary. Your primary tree would definitely be the one that you spend more divinity in, and your secondary tree is going to be the one that you spend less divinity in. Of course, you can pull whatever points you want from whatever you have in the tree. There's a lot of fun abilities in the game, like Ice Shards, Ice Nova, and even more, and they are highly customizable in like 1,000 ways. To give you an idea of this, let's do a quick demo here on Ice Shards, and I'm going to show you how a seemingly simple ability like Ice Shards can turn into an absolutely masterful ability just by changing a couple things. So first off, let's put Ice Shards on the main button. And we're going to fire off Ice Shards. So this is the base Ice Shards that you have in the game. Nothing too fancy. You just hold down the button, and as you can see, not really a whole lot going on there, right? Just a straightforward attack that does a spread in front of you, and that's it. Now, if you start focusing and customizing it, you can do things like a homing attack. So I could potentially add homing attacks here so that when I'm outside in the wild and I'm fighting monsters, that my attacks are homing in on targets. This allows them to obviously kind of act like a guided arrow, which is pretty darn cool. But that's not the end be all of how you can customize the abilities in this game. And if I went over every single one, this review would be many hours long. But suffice it to say, like, now I have a homing missile essentially, which is going to home in on targets and dish out damage even if I'm not even aiming at them. And then we can take this even further. You can do things like adding in the orbit ability. The orbit ability allows the projectiles to spin around you in a circle, which is pretty darn cool. So if I fire off the projectiles, you'll notice that the projectiles will start to spin around me in a circle as a defensive mechanism, which is pretty darn neat too. Then we can take things a step further, and we can potentially use the Chaos ability. So the Chaos ability allows me to fire off a large number of projectiles in essentially tons of different directions. So we're going to go ahead and add 1 to Torrent, and I'm going to add 3 to Chaos, and we're going to be firing off essentially what is like a nova of projectiles, which allows us to get a crazy spinning vortex around us, which, whenever we encounter a monster, will immediately attack that monster because these are homing missiles, reminded. So they are immediately going to act as a defensive mechanism versus any monster that we come near, which is just absolutely amazing. And all of the abilities in the game seem to be able to be customized in these ways, where you can add in a tons of very cool functionality and effect just by simply going through the process of deciding exactly what you want to do with the ability. There's simple things like when you attack a monster that's frozen, you can cause that monster to be like have an additional explosion when they hit. To give you another example of an ability, let's go to Ice Nova. Ice Nova is a really good one too. So let's grab Ice Nova, and we're going to put some points into it. And we're going to bring that down to the bar. So Ice Nova's animation really impressed me when I first did it. As you can see, very pretty. Kind of a small Ice Nova. It does a massive amount of damage. It is very good for chilling targets, and when you use it on targets, you'll notice that it is very effective. Like, for instance, if I can get my butt in here. But it does have a cooldown, and it's not exactly as easy to use as some of the other abilities. But you start working into it, and there's things like Double Cast. Double Cast allows you to get a free Ice Nova at the target of your cursor when you cast the ability on your character. So, for instance, if there were some monsters over here, and I was over here, I could do this and get a free Ice Nova over there. Which, of course, that was in the in the grass, so it wasn't very easy to see because the grass kind of covered it up, but you can see it much better now. Then you can add in other things, like, for instance, you can add in the enhanced freeze or the flash freeze. The flash freeze is absolutely amazing in that, well, it essentially just causes any monster that you hit with it to be instantly frozen, as opposed to being chilled or adding an ailment to them. Flash Freeze increases the cooldown of the ability, but turns it into a crowd control effect, essentially, which is going to automatically apply a freeze to the targets when you use it. So to use an example here, and now everything that was around us essentially became frozen. You can also potentially use other effects, like Enhanced Freeze, which increases the duration. There's cooldown charges, which allows you to add multiple charges to it, but it's incompatible with Flash Freeze. So in this particular case, if I were to add the cooldown charges, I could potentially allow myself to fire it off multiple times. So in this case, I have 3 charges right now, and I have double cast. So 1, 2, 3. Now I can have a very effective ability that I can spam multiple times when I'm in danger, essentially. And if this doesn't give you an idea of how customizable the system is with these particular skills, I don't really know exactly how else to show you then. Because every single one of the abilities in the game seems to have this very unique ability to customize in a myriad of ways. Like, for instance, Storm Nimbus allows you to convert all of your damage to cold, or it allows you to convert all your damage to lightning. But it also gives you the ability to add frost armor, Storm Enchantment, which can give you buffs to your damage output, and even just simply using it for resistances, like a resist cold aura. On top of the skills, there's also a myriad of passive abilities which give you huge bonuses to specific effects. Like, for instance, if you're a projectile-based character, you can go with this one, Storm Guidance, which gives you a huge amount of damage, homing, and range. And in this game, it's very similar to Diablo 2 in that range is also equal to speed, and speed and duration essentially are combined to give you the maximum distance of a projectile. So if you can increase the range of the projectile, you're also increasing the speed of the projectile, then you can get a much greater range out of your projectiles by going that particular direction. And the customizability of the characters has been very fun. I've built several characters so far. A full archer, utilizing things like barrage and heavy shot. I've used a kind of like a full ice character. I also made several other characters up to this point. Like where I'm right now, I'm making a melee character, and I'm having a lot of fun just exploring the game and all the various options that I have available to me. The game itself isn't very long. So this is another thing that we definitely have to talk about, is that if you play through the entire game all the way, you actually, do all the quests, kill all the bosses, listen to the dialogue and everything else, it's probably going to take you somewhere around 9 to 10 hours. It took me about 10 and a half, and I was literally going everywhere, searching everything like a raccoon, but I actually did miss one boss which I was surprised. Missed a whole boss just off on the side, just didn't even know he existed. And Leon was laughing at me. He's like, "You didn't do the cemetery?" I was like, "I don't remember a cemetery." So even 10.5 hours for me was not completely beating the game all the way through. There's some very interesting weapon types in the game as well, where you have certain customization on how your basic weapons actually function. So, like for instance, right now I'm using a staff, and the staff actually gives me the ability to fire firebolts. So you have a bow, obviously, that fires arrows. You have melee weapons that allow you to attack. You have caster staffs, which there are fire staves, lightning staves, there's ice staves. There's a lot of different combinations of like base item types, which are very fun to play with. And of course, the ability to fire off fireballs like this means that you can, of course, spend a little bit of time and you can customize your basic attack. So you don't even have to use one of these main attacks. You could potentially even just take like one of the lightning staves. You could add, say, 17 points into your lightning stave. You could add things like volley, so you could get multiple fireballs. You could add tailwind so that they penetrate targets. You could add things like fire explosions so that when they hit a target that's burning, that the target explodes. And now all of a sudden your basic skill, which was just a measly little one shot, is now multiple fireballs that will also explode when they hit targets, which is pretty darn cool. Even the basic skills can become very powerful abilities in this game, which is very neat. The game itself, like as you play through it, there's just so many beautiful places in it, so many vistas and like areas that you're gonna like look over like a mountaintop or a range or something. I'm trying to remember like where some of the vistas are. There's so many really cool ones, but let me see if I can find one for you at the very least. Graphically, it's just been a treat to play this game. I think there's one right here in the city, actually, now that I remember. Up here on this right-hand side, there is a vista in the city. Yes, this is it right here. So this is one of the examples of the vistas, and you'll find these all over the place, where they basically just kind of like bring you to a cliffside, you zoom out, and you get to see like the entire area below. And you can actually go down there. That's not just like a view. That's actually where you're going to go, and you're going to be exploring. So it's kind of cool to actually see the vistas, because later on you're actually going to be there exploring that area. Like down there, right there, is a corpse I can click on, which is actually kind of behind me. But you see the corpse right here. You can actually click on that. So that's one of the corpses that you're gonna want to get later on, because it's got some sweet loot on it. As for the quality of items in the game, there is quite a few different base types. There's white items, there's blue items, there's yellow items, there's also set items or green items. I call them set items because they're green. There's also purple items, which seem to be unique items as far as I can tell. They seem to be carefully crafted, non-randomized pieces of equipment. This is an example of some of the purple items in the game. So this is the hippocampus scapula, which comes from that specific boss, the hippocampus. And then this one, Kana's sword, comes from a specific quest that you do in the game. There was also a shield, which I can show you guys later on during the live stream, that I got randomly as I was playing through the game. So not only are there unique items that seem to drop from specific monsters, kind of similar to Diablo 1 style, like when you would do the Arcane's Valor quest, and the Arcane, like Arcane's Valor would drop from that specific area, right? Similar to that, there are specific ones that drop from specific monsters, but then there's also random ones that are dropping from random monsters as you're playing the game, which is cool. Yeah, I believe David pointed out that they're called infrequent items, the set items. The green items, they're called infrequent. I have a couple infrequent items that I found. They always seem to have some sort of very specific passive ability on them. Like infrequent bonus to poison damage, or like a chance to increase your physical damage by a small percentage. They always have some very strange passive modifier on them, from what I've seen. The vendors in the game are very useful.
To buy a bow?
You're going to find yourself going to the vendors on a regular basis, looking for equipment. So you will be checking in here constantly, looking for upgrades to your gear. The stats are actually quite interesting too. So if we go take a look at the attributes revolve around 3 main types. So might, knowledge, and agility. And then 3 subtypes, which is fitness, resolve, and cunning. Fitness, resolve, and cunning cannot be increased directly. They can only be increased by adding points to the subsequent other abilities. So, for instance, if you add points to Vigor, which is mainly your hit points, it actually gives you a tiny bonus to all of them. I think it's like 2 bonus. But if you add points to Might, for instance, you will get Fitness and Resolve, and so forth and so on. Everything in the game seems to revolve around these stats, whereas when you put on equipment, like, for instance, my armor requires Fitness and Might to equip. Whereas some pieces of equipment will require other things like cunning, agility, and so forth and so on. This particular vendor right here tends to sell things that are agility based, or they are fitness based, usually a combination of 2 different ones. And from what I've been able to tell, it seems like there are roughly about like 6 or 7 different types of armor, because you can have like a might fitness, you can have a might resolve, you can have a knowledge resolve, you can have a like knowledge cunning, you can have a cunning agility, you can so forth and so on. Like, you get the picture. Like, there's tons of various combinations of how those stats come together to allow you to put on different pieces of equipment. And it's really interesting because, like, there are a lot of bows in the game that are agility based, but then there are also bows in the game that are might based, like this particular bow. And I've had a great deal of fun, like, playing around with all the various effects in the game. Speaking of the effects in the game, there is a tutorial in the actual system that goes over a lot of the effects in the game if you're interested in learning about how the effects work and how they actually function. Like, it tells you about the attribute points, the masteries. There's also Morai's Codex, which goes over a bunch of things as well. Like, for instance, the different classes. Technically, the classes are just simply a combination of 2 things. As you can see, this one, the Storm Rogue, is called the Stormblade. The Rogue Earth is called the Ash Stalker. The Elementalist is called the Storm Earth is called the Elementalist. The Warfare Earth is called the Battle Mage. The Warfare Storm is called the Tempest, and the Warfare Rogue is called the Reaver. There's also apparently seems to be some challenges in the game where you are supposed to beat the game as an individual class with not 2 masteries. And there's even one called the Unblessed, which is where they're challenging you to beat the game as a completely non-masteried character. So you just need to beat the game as a regular character with no modifiers, which is also rather interesting. More than this. So there's so much more to go over. Let's talk about multiplayer real quick. So to do this, I need to exit the game. And there's a reason why I need to exit the game. And this is because to play multiplayer in Titan Quest, you need to actually boot up the experimental client. Play the unstable Titan Quest 2 early multiplayer preview, not for review. Now, I really wanted to get some time on the multiplayer so I could explain to you guys what's wrong with it, what the limitations are, and whether or not you should play it. So I played through my first time on single player, and eventually I got to the point where I wanted to play on multiplayer, and I did. Me and Leon played together, and also, Leon and I, and also Khan hopped in yesterday, and we played with Khan, and Khan may come in later as well. So we may have some more multiplayer. So there's 2 different forms of multiplayer on the multiplayer client. So this is something I need to point out first. If you hit the play button, you cannot play your single player character. It says right here that this is a public build, not compatible with your multiplayer preview, blah, 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 right? So you can't play any of your single player characters on multiplayer, so let's get that out of the way to begin with. All of your multiplayer characters are playable in single player, which is really quite strange. So if you hit the play button and you just simply boot up one of your characters, like, for instance, I'm going to boot up my character here, this kind of counts as single player. So there are some things that are not available in multiplayer, And we're going to go over some of those things to start off with. But the really interesting thing is that despite the fact that some of the things are not available in multiplayer, if you play your multiplayer character in a single player game, essentially you don't host a multiplayer game, you just play normally in the multiplayer client, you can still get access to things like, for instance, the ritual of Ares. But you don't get access to the ritual of Ares or the rituals of Athena when you are in the multiplayer client. There's also some issues in the multiplayer client that also don't tend to happen when you're playing the single player version, and I'm going to go over those real quick. We've actually been like sort of writing them down as we went along. So first off, gold is not shared in the game for some reason when you play multiplayer. So it drops gold on the ground for everybody, but if one person picks it up, they're the only ones that gets the gold and nobody else gets any gold. It's definitely a bug in the system, and I can understand, like, some of these things have made me understand why they've trying to frame the multiplayer as not ready yet. But I have to say that I've had worse launches with games that were actually fully fleshed out than I have with this, but we're still going to talk about all the problems with the multiplayer client. So the portals are kind of jankety. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes you can't take your own portal if you're in a game with somebody else. The host seems to have more privileges than the people who are in the group, which is kind of poopy. The combat text is strange. So when you hit a monster in the game, the combat text pops up and it shows you how much damage that you've done to the monster. Well, you can also see the other player's combat text as well. So when somebody else hits the monster, not you, you're also going to see whatever damage that they did at the same time, which can get a little confusing, especially if you're trying to figure out how much damage you're doing at any particular moment. There are some sound glitches, like, for instance, very silly enough, is that if you are the host of the game and somebody else is in the game with you and they drink a potion, this button right here, you will hear them drink the potions, which is really weird. Like, I'll be in town, like, shopping in the, going to the shopkeep or looking through my stash, and Leon would be, like, out in the middle of nowhere fighting something, frantically spamming his potions, and I would just keep hearing the potion sound effect over and over again, and I'm like, why am I hearing the potion sound? At one point or another, there was this boss, or not boss, it was an encounter where the monsters, it was right here, were like banging their shields really loudly, right? And they made a bunch of noise. Well, we killed the monsters and the sound stopped, but Leon said he kept hearing the sound for like forever afterward. And even when we came back later with the staff, he said the drum sound was still playing there, even though it had stopped for me ages ago. Going even further, the stash is very bugged. So there's something weird about the stash in multiplayer. It works fine in single player. So before we go any further, it works fine in single player. Also, this base tab right here is not shared among other characters. But if you go into a multiplayer game with somebody else, for some reason or another, the stash bugs out and you can't get access to any of your stuff if you're not the host. That's what I mean by the host seems to have special privileges over everybody else, because there definitely are some small things that are not working properly, like the stash doesn't work properly. So you have to leave, you have to go to your own game, grab your items out of your stash, and then you need to come back. There is also a odd bug with energy regeneration for people that are not the host of the game. Occasionally the game is killing the energy regeneration. So you can see right now I have like 40 energy regeneration per second. Occasionally when you join as the non-host, so if you're just joining a host, sometimes your energy regeneration breaks, and the only way to fix it is to leave the game and come back, which is also very strange. And when it does happen, it makes it very difficult to play the game because your mana just won't come back, basically, at all. There was also some issues with the bosses attacking, and like from inside of the arena. So when you go to fight a boss, similar to most games, there is a doorway on the arena. Let me go to a boss real quick, and I'll show you what I mean. Let me find one that's nearby a doohickey. Trying to find one that's actually close by. Where this? Oh yeah, he doesn't have access to a lot of this stuff yet, does he? No, this is my little baby character, so he doesn't have access to a bunch of this stuff. But there is a doorway. Essentially, it's a like force field that prevents you from leaving the area. And if you go into a zone that has this like force field, and you die, you come back, right, and your friend is in there fighting the boss, you can actually sit outside the arena. You can't go in because the force field is blocking your way. But you can literally just sit outside and like shoot at the boss, and then the boss will actually attack you from inside the arena. But he can't leave the arena either, and you can't get inside the arena. Which was also really strange, very exploitative actually, because you could literally just sit outside the arena and fire at the boss while the boss couldn't get to you. um, Overall, it is buggy, but would I recommend the multiplayer experience to anyone who wants to play with their friends? Absolutely. Would I recommend the game to anyone who wants to play with their friends? This is my shield I was telling you guys about earlier. Would I recommend the game to anybody who wants to play? Absolutely. There's not really a lot of content, but the game's also not expensive. If they had posted the game for like $60 or $70 or $80 or something, and they made it like extremely expensive, I could understand like people's hesitance to play the game. But it's currently on sale for $23.99, and I've already spent probably about, I want to say like 20 or so hours in the game. And at 20 hours into the game, I've had a blast. I've had a lot of fun. I've done multiplayer. I've done single player. I enjoyed all the content. And I started making secondary characters because of how fun it was to design the characters and come up with very interesting builds. And I'd say for $23.99, the game definitely has more than enough content to justify its price tag at this particular point in time. The multiplayer is buggy, yes, but it is a very good experience. And I think that if you played through with 2 or 3 other friends, like of your buddies, I think you would have a very fun time. There are workarounds to pretty much every issue that's currently in multiplayer at the moment, so it's not really that big of a deal. And in general, I think I freaking love this game. I think that's the moral of the story, and I can't wait for them to come out with more. And that's really the answer to the entire question is we need more, right? More masteries. We need, more quests, more dialogue. We need more areas. We need more bosses. We need more everything. Like at this point, it's really just a matter of waiting for them to come out with more. Um, just one act so far. That's all we have access to. So this is the early access version of the game, and it's obvious that they don't have everything in it, right? And that's kind of like the entire purpose of what I'm talking about here is that despite the fact that there's only one act, and despite the fact that there's only 4 masteries, and despite the fact that there's, like a limited multiplayer setup, there's tons of content here to be had, and there's tons of fun. Like I'm literally going in for day 3 right now. I'm about to hop in with Leon and maybe Khan too if he shows up, and we're gonna hop in and do some more farming and boss killing and playing around with different character builds and stuff. By the way, there's one of the green items right there. As you can see, this one has one of those weird buffs on it. It says infrequent 10% increased poison damage. None of the other items that you'll find in the game have these weird infrequent modifiers on them. The green items seem to be very interesting there. What's my favorite build? I can't really say. I haven't really played around with all of them, but the archer build that I did yesterday, the ice archer build, was very overpowered. I was absolutely blowing through the game on the ice archer. This is my melee character that I'm going to be playing around with today, and then the first stream was some more of a caster type. I did a kind of like a caster build. You don't know how many different characters you can have? Yeah, I don't know either. I'm assuming a lot. I mean, I would highly recommend it. And that's kind of like the entire point of this little recording here is that I wanted to like put my thoughts down, and I'm going to upload this as a separate video, of course, for you guys. And if you have any individual questions to ask, like you can put them in the comments, and I'll try and get to you about it. There's so much more that I can do with this. Obviously, there's caster builds that I could make. Like even with just the current four masteries, I feel like the possibilities are, yes, as Mr. Flappy said, is almost endless. Like it feels like you can have tons and tons of different combinations of just amazing, crazy builds that you could potentially come up with. I honestly kind of want to do a core build, which would be kind of fun. So like there is an option to just not take any masteries and just do the core build, which is where you beef up things like the barrier, the dodge, the primary attack 1 and primary attack 2, and you have like multiple different primary attacks and barriers and stuff like that. I think even like a basic attack build could be really fun in this game with the way they have it set up, which is pretty dang neat. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos. Be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this, and thanks for watching my little review of Titan Quest 2.